This is good, General. I was hoping to catch you out here on the river this morning.
Oh, did you see that?
Let's take subnetting to a field that is a little less defined, shall we? Often you'll see me talk. I brought you to the river today on the fly fishing guide because I want to talk about neural net. Not necessarily take Elon on here, but you got to understand that this is going to happen. Just two brothers out there fishing on the river that's the neural net, that's the rabbit. That was the connections of the brain binarily using 1, 2, binary 3, right? That'll get me into this type of system because I have one corporeal form. We'll get into the hook patterns and combinations, thinking binarily with a technique on the river here in a minute about why some people are just that fast on the river. You ever get with some people and do the calculus of psychology to results that do? Well, that's how you subnet that system. It's how you break down that system and burst a vampire into flames out there on that river about, yeah, I see what you're doing. You're trying to clean out my...
It's not going to go with the wind because it's dirt. Yeah.
It's a great concept when you think about 10 times the intelligence level, but what is the comparable nature on the river? Joe Rogan and friend that I caught that clip from about, well, they brought up a cross and it starts putting you into a grand mal seizure out there about what this is. Now, primitive cultures, you'll have to know things about, I forget the 2 billion year old reactor I just recently heard about, all the Mayan civilizations, ancient Egypt, Anunnaki, Mesopotamia, and the list goes on and on about these cultures that do some things. We're not going to give a crap about any of that from the nature of this. We are learning from either I can do this on my own on that river with sticks and things, or in hand. It's a binary action. If I am doing one technique, then there's a big difference between the 1, 2 sharps. It depends on how your brain actually does this, but it's still binarily super determination. That sharps is salty right hand rule because we live on Earth. Right, heat decay, first generation star to where we are, and take it way back, electroweak force, skip over all that. And at any rate, we're predatorial base. It's our CT paradox. If you do the average, we are on the marginal prepared side of omnivore as a right hand rule. Just infinity, an apple in a vacuum chamber for 2 billion years, as much as an iron ball that was heated to red hot and put in a vacuum chamber, right? That's going to create a lot of pressure in there, as that heat doesn't have anywhere to go. It doesn't have oxygen molecules, it doesn't have nitrogen molecules to go to. But again, getting off subject here. The salty part of your brain, what is attack mode? If I don't have the time, the distance between A to B, and those moments of common reciprocals, if an animal with a broken leg, it wouldn't matter. If the leg on the animal is broken, then it routes with that fractal on multiples, right? So, like, if I take all my consideration, all I ever had is one. I had one animal with a broken leg, that was easy. I would see that again. And that's that beta part of your brain saying, well, I'm going to work the subnet of it instead of this immediate action, and there's a opposite, the adjacent on the hypotenuse in there. So why it always does 0, 1, 2, 1, 2, 3 is a product like that. So you can get Farnsworth out there. Wonderful, great news, everybody. Again, there's... When we get to the fly patterns, when I'm thinking about you should be able to watch me on neural net and a heart rate monitor, because you'll know I'm not lying to you. I'm not changing the situation. I'm saying there's a difference between a lie and replicating the field theory. I cannot be truthful about the information when I'm opposing a math problem to you. And that's a subfield of it. It's a 0, 1 portion of it. They're both zeros and 1. 0 is 1, 1 is 0. When I add it out, it's got to equal to 0. But I'm looking at it right-hand rule with one increment. This happened again. That is consistent. That is primed in the one department which is the nested subnet of that system that is why it is one in an area where there are two, but the fractal on the geometry doesn't quite correlate mathematically what does when there are no natural right lines in space. Or circles, to be perfectly fair with you. We have waves. When we're drawing out the scale of this nymph pattern, it can refer to any pattern. It can refer to any subspecies of fish. That from brook trout would be usually your smallest or something like that, that you would need a size 16 hook for, comparatively to a 12 gauge, right? I think it's 410, 12 gauge, 10 gauge, so on and so forth. And it works like that with hooks too. It doesn't matter. That's what it'll do once you get used to that pattern. Some people do that binary aspect, but once it hits, it hits. That works like a multiple of something else that I've done before, something that is nested in my brain, and it goes right to that memory of that space, that field theory where I redesigned the equation. And so, like LiDAR in cars or overhead on something like that, that there needs to be two moments, if you will, just between here and here that really describe what one is, not necessarily the outer edge. I have to have it squared. I have to have it Gaussian to that nature that this frame slides into where I'm going to put that fly. And if I do that correctly, General, then we've got out of computer subnesting, which is an important thing. It's like you study anything and you get good with it, just not on the current, the river today. I mean, because if you had neural net and it still couldn't beat this guy without watching Zeus make fire here to actually design a program, a linear equation that said, okay, if in a situation like that, and, or, X, Y, and Z, that you'll get that Bunny D flip-flopping all over the place down there, and, well, that's going to be less is more is less when it comes to the thickness of the wire, the compositions and metals that make it up, and or anything else that kind of puts in that department. Now, again, when I do this, I try my best to find practical levels, not just some hoodoo-voodooery of the perfect squares cultist orders out there in order to do it. Now, there's some real things, some analytical problems where you'll get the people talking. And they're marketing some things, and that's important. Remember, there are three parts of 0, 1, and 2, right? Integers, higher orders. If Salty, as a general, is above NCOs because these rookies are rookies. 18-year-old on the Lumen technique says the subframe always works from developmental brain periods into adolescence, into maturity. And there might be subfields of those things, but they're still on the bandwidth of light as a spectrum. We can create a multiple of that where it's in a zero field that describes that length, that gives us a Jacobian matrix, the medical, mental health, nutrition. Those would be subfields as the really enriched when you think about the body, about why there would be so much mass in that neutron or the nucleus to describe its momentum. That doesn't exactly solve Heisenberg's uncertainty, but it narrows that bandwidth down to such a point that at that point in time I don't need to OP it. I don't need to, I'm worried about windage, so the more gas you put on it, the less affected by wind you are. The more mass you have behind that, dropping a bowling ball, how ridiculous, off of a tower, isn't going to have the same effect as the Hulk's fist coming down into the ground. It's going to come straight down. Essentially, it's actually coming down a wave. It is affected by that, but not out of the margins of center mass in that Higgs, because essentially that's what you kind of did there. You set up a standard of parameters, and it doesn't need to be a complicated goal. Drop something off of a big tower onto a target, and with that you get a big spray paint can explosion, and great for views, and that's that kind of hit you're looking for. But we were, when it comes to the brain aspect, they're still trying to make the pitch. And every once in a while, you'll see hand mannerisms, some laugh, some cry, the isomatic crack in the right way. That this is our subfield, that we visually interpret the pattern base for this. That is to say, there's a couple of IO games out there where it's like you'll start to 5, 5, 5, 3, 3, and then 2, 2, 2, or 3, 3, 3, whatever, and it designs a shape. Well, when doing the video card's loop to the corruption that screen was set up on an error screen. And I know it seemed like I said a lot of words there, but I actually only said two or four of them, one, two or four of them. I definitely said more than one. There was, I forget what I said though, but that video loop inside of here is a linear. So we made that loop, we went back and adjusted. I looked at the register. You were up or down, yes or no, about the situation that we were accepting that. There, I would assume that you pretty good would say, yeah, I get that. So we can touch that and get back to where the distance of that moment would roughly put us. And so even if it is a subject matter, like we're trying to sell Hackle here, we're trying to sell CDC, it's our business, we're guides, this is our profession, this is what we do Spartan in terms of the subfield of the phalanx and the phalanx there. When they don't stand together right, it falls apart just like soldiers. Even though that's not a straight line of soldiers with shields. If we kind of forget that the husbandry of this river, then we're going to lose that. So we got to have proper game husbandry about what this subfield is. When you multiply those things, the rabbit calc inside here, seasonal wave functions and things like that, they add up into big calculations that matter very distinctively into what I'm looking at in a subject space. One unit, a brain scan, a heart rate monitored distance that said over the event when I'm tracking in a parallel line between the pipes here, it is Gaussian. It's just Gaussian orientated in the correct direction, because if you get it wrong on the wrong angle, the pi, 2 pi, 4 pi, or 2 pi, 3 pi, 4 pi, but I don't usually use that for anything, really. I mean, I know you use it all the time. It's here to there to roughly guesstimate the time. I have this between me eating dinner later or whatever. So let's change the subject. Let's put all of this into the geometry. We're gonna close her down a little bit, fold her up into just a hellfire storm of nothing. Alright, but anyways, we're going to make that a gauge 14 hook. As far as what we're concerned on the river, I don't want to catch fish smaller than that anyways. I really don't. Proper husbandry, we're not stressing the fish around it, so whatever that's small. And then we're only going to use the primary colors, because beyond the primary colors, as a, what do they call them? Indicator flies. Those primary colors give me the range of what's doing inside of there, and then the multiple of that is like, well, on conditions. There are other situations where yellow red combination or homogenization, the hackle feathers that were designed a certain way, you could say that it was blended, that I had a feather that was red. So this gets really complicated real fast. You'll start getting into larger numbers from that 14 gauge hook to hackle feathers, to any other common feathers in that department, mayflies, caddises. Why, if on the subframe of caddisflies or mayflies, it start with a larva, well, actually a seed, and then it'll go into a larva phase, a few nymph phases into a larva before it actually emerges and flies, but it's still within the life cycle of that subframes movements. Right now, it's just between growth, it's gaining mass. It's gaining mass linearly on a square to the average over the log of calculus to actually say that that is a Hubble 45 on theta. And good stuff in there. I'm going to leave it at that.